Oftentimes, our political discourse is directed by hot takes and some of the most controversial opinions that are out there. And while I think this phenomenon has been a troubling prospect for the thinking man, it is no less the current state of our political conversation. And this is perhaps the case of the most recent hot take that has everyone up in arms, Charlie Kirk's assertion that if he were to see a black pilot in the context of the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion things happening, he would be nervous. Watch here.
And that's why I think this United story and the DEI story hits so hard, because we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits, or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off. And I feel better now thinking about that.
No, I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the
you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has created.
Now, this has caused a lot of people to get angry, including a lot of black conservatives that say that this is racist and this is why that black folks don't trust conservatives, and this is why there's a sort of barrier between right-leaning politics and black folk. And then there are just other folks on the left that are just flatly calling Charlie Kirk a racist. Now, let me just advise all of you on something before I continue. In this era of clickbait and hot takes and 60-second clips, it is important to be precise and deliberate with every single word you say, because there's always going to be someone out there who will try to twist your words to fit their political ends, or who will misunderstand your words innocently, and then on the basis of that misunderstanding form a perception of you in their mind that they will then use to interact with you for the rest, until they are convinced that that idea they have of you in their mind is untrue. And we all know what happens when someone already has a first impression of you. It's incredibly hard to disabuse them of that first impression. This is why I don't advise people do hot takes. I think instead of doing a hot take, it's better to just think, to be deliberate and precise with your language, and to say things that you know will move the needle forward in the conversation and not just cause a fire. I think that Charlie Kirk, in his defense, was indeed trying to be deliberate, but I don't think that this was the best way to make the point he's trying to make. The point Charlie Kirk is trying to make is actually an interesting point, and it's a compelling point. And it's the point that standards that are based on equity, not equality, but standards that are based on equity that involved in hiring practices actually decrease the quality of workers in those institutions and of workers selected by those hiring practices, and therefore cause certain safety concerns. Whereas equal standards that are undoubtedly based upon merit and based upon performance would most certainly be a better metric at safeguarding the lives of those in the profession, particularly those that are in the airline industry. So yes, we can talk about how equitable standards versus equal standards are bad. We can talk about how the destruction of merit that DEI 100% does is also bad. But the way we talk about these things is almost as important about the fact that we talk about them. Because if you talk about them in a way that is not going to be able to reach people that need to hear it the most, or if you talk about it in a way that could be wildly misinterpreted, then you're not going to be as effective as possible. So the truth is this. Over the past few months, as the posting of this video, there have been tremendous concerns with the safety of the airline industry due to the fact that we have several high-profile officials in that industry, including the CEO of United Airlines, who have made it clear that they want to increase quota hires, and by default, they obviously will pride that over skills, they'll pride it over merit and things of that sort. Whenever you have, I don't care if it's racially based, I don't care if it's sex-based, I don't care if it's gender-based, I don't care if it's status-based, as in you are in a family that has connections and they get you. Whenever you have any hiring practice that defies merit and uses some overarching principle other than merit to inform it, you will get a lower quality of work, you will get potential safety concerns, and you will not get the best applicants for the job. Very simple. I don't care if it's race or anything else. That is simply a universal law. It's an axiom. because because here's the thing about DEI. DEI ignores the principle of limitations. Or rather, it weaponizes the principle of limitations in a manner that is ultimately destructive for society. What do I mean? The principle of limitations simply says this. We are finite human beings living in a finite world, and thus we produce a finite society and a finite amount of goods, services, and products. And in our finitude, in our limitations, there are certain boundaries we cannot cross unless we wish chaos to break out and ensue. There are certain boundaries we cannot cross unless we wish for bad things to happen. One of those boundaries would be if we are limited in doing something good by virtue of our expertise, which we are. If you're not a good pilot, you can't fly a plane. If you're not a good driver, you shouldn't be driving trucks. If we are limited by our skills, then that sets forth a precedent upon which we should judge people who wish to enter certain things. But the moment the principle of limitations is then reversed, and not based on a universal standard, but instead based on a standard that is immutable, such as your sex or your race, is the moment that limitations become inversed, and no longer is the emphasis on actually being good at what you're doing. No longer is the emphasis on skills, and no longer is the emphasis on self-betterment. The emphasis is now on something that you inherited. The emphasis is now on your status, is on something that is totally and utterly irrelevant. And thus, limitations become a weapon against mankind. That is what DEI is. It is an inversion of an important philosophical principle that is now being used to push a political agenda that, quite frankly, harms all of us in the long run. So Kirk is right to speak out against this. And Kirk is also right to mention, and this is another point I want to head on, that DEI creates racial animus, because it does. It 100% does. It creates racial animus in the same way that affirmative action creates certain perception about people in certain races. And of course, people will say, well, Christian, the number one beneficiary of affirmative action are white women. Okay, so when you have a program that addresses the population, and a majority of the population that happens to be white, you shouldn't be surprised that minorities are not on the top of the list. But the truth is, minorities like Asians and majorities like white people are indisputably impacted by affirmative action programs. And certain other people benefit at the cost of those two groups, especially at the cost of Asians. This is a well-documented fact. When you have a culture in secondary education, high school, where Asian kids are literally told, despite having almost near-perfect SATs, that they should not apply for certain colleges because they won't get in due to these diversity standards, then you have a system where, if not in explicit policy form, but instead in cultural perception form, Asians are disadvantaged. There's nothing more that really can be said to contest the notion that these policies, these ideas, if they don't have a tangible impact in concrete policy, they have a tangible impact in perception, and perception guides action, and actions produce tangible results. That's what's going on here. So yes, there is a perception in many cases that a lot of black folks who have gotten to where they are not there on the basis of merit. It's a horrible perception. It's a perception that I myself have witnessed with my own eyes. And it's not from people that are trying to be racist. It's from people whose minds have been conditioned in the context of policies that pride equity over equality. Very simply. So if you want to stop those outcomes from happening, if you want to prevent such occurrences of thought from happening, you can't prevent all of them, obviously, because the human mind is dynamic, but if you want to at least lessen them in the minds of good-hearted people, you have to stop giving people reasons to think these things. But the reason why I would not, as Kirk said, be suspicious if I had a black pilot flying me is because I exercise two core principles. Number one, the principle of empiricism, that if I'm going to believe something, I have to have clear and indisputed evidence, either from a logical standpoint or from an empirical standpoint, preferably the empirical standpoint, because empirics is more rooted in reality than simple abstract thinking is, then I have to have those two things to believe it. If I don't have any of those things to believe it, and preferably a combination of the two, I'm not going to believe it. So I'm not going to walk into a plane and immediately think, if I see a black person, oh my gosh, he's unqualified, Because I demand more of myself, and I am I'm a thinking man, and I demand that other people be rational as well. Use your God-given faculties to arrive at sound conclusions on the basis of fact. So I won't think that. And the moment we start thinking like this, I mentioned goodwill. Society, on a subterranean basis, is fundamentally held together by a set of moral principles. The key principle that society is held together, cannot exist without this principle, is the principle of justice, which simply means you exercise moral action through non-interference. Because justice is the principle that safeguards our property, safeguards our promises, safeguards our persons, and without justice, there is no regulating principle to stop those things from being harmed by bad actors or to stop violations of those things. Well, justice is a necessary principle for society. But there are also secondary and tertiary principles that are not morally required, but they are morally preferable for society. The secondary principle I'm talking about here is the principle of goodwill. You can have a society that functions without people giving the benefit of the doubt to someone else, without people showing a level of kindness and empathy and sympathy towards other people, without people fully trying to understand and empathize with their fellow men. You can have a society where those things don't exist, but you can't have a good society when those things don't exist. So the moment I look at a black pilot and on the basis of prejudice, on the basis of intuition, against the backdrop of DEI or whatever backdrop, I don't care, and I say, you're not qualified or I'm scared now, is the moment I reject the principle of goodwill, and it's the moment the condition and quality of society deteriorates. And if the condition and quality of society deteriorates, then you're going to have worse social outcomes. You're going to have an environment where the principle of justice can be more easily and readily violated. You're going to have enmity between men. And if you have enmity, hatred between men, what happens? Conflicts, needless division, violence happens. So on that basis alone, I reject Kirk's characterization because I want to have a society of goodwill. Goodwill that is freely given, but if it is violated, it is taken away as appropriate. But also, I don't just want to have a society of goodwill. Of course I do. And DEI obviously violates that. Because DEI quite literally says, no, goodwill is not enough. We have to literally advantage certain groups over others so that then we can prop up people who we believe are oppressed, and then attack people who we believe are the oppressors. Right? The bluff of multiculturalism translated into modern form with these diversity politics, power politics policies. So not only does it create enmity, but it also leaves one open to epistemic errors. Intuition should be the beginning of logical inquiry. Intuition is not the beginning and end of logical inquiry. So it's fine to have an intuition that says one thing, but you should always confirm your intuition through facts. You should always confirm your intuition through further investigation. You should always confirm your intuition through reason. So I lay these thoughts before you just to simply say that while Kirk has an absolute point, that promoting equitable standards over equal standards has a deleterious effect on the quality and safety of certain activities, and has a deleterious effect on society, it should also be said that in fighting those equitable standards, and fighting against DEI, and fighting against social justice, and fighting against these horrific concepts which destroy merit, destroy individualism, and put up collectivism in a different form, we should also be willing to fight for goodwill, fight for sympathy, fight for empathy, so that we can rebuild society from the state that DEI put it in to a healthier, more prosperous, and more vigorous union, compact of people who truly understand what it means to be a good neighbor, who truly understand what it means to be a sound thinker, and who truly understand what it means to value the right things. DEI exists because our society right now does not value the right things. There are people in our society that value the wrong things. And we can help correct that, but we cannot correct that if we endorse the same mentality that those who use race politics as a means of power do. We cannot correct it if we use the enemy's methods. My friends, I love you guys so much. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Also be sure to Donate to me if you want to. All the information is in the comment section down below. Join the Discord. Be a part of the revolution of the mind. My friends, I love you guys so much. Study history. Study philosophy. Remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.